The Doom series is one that really needs no introduction. Pioneering the first-person shooter to such perfection that early games of the genre were originally known as Doom clones, id's seminal series has inspired not only its contemporaries, but inspires itself into constantly finding new ways to reinvent the Doom formula.
Starting in 2016, id Software has successfully created one of the most interesting trilogies in modern gaming. Doom 2016 was a religious experience for me. I had never played an FPS with such ferociously fluid action. Each combat encounter felt like a perfect symphony of blood and guts, and I was the conductor, bouncing between and exploding through enemies, changing weapons on the fly, feeling like an unstoppable god. This is what the Doom series has always provided. Without a doubt, Doom 2016 is my favorite FPS of all time. Unlike most people though, Doom Eternal wasn't love at first sight for me. Instead of just giving me the power fantasy of my dreams, I had to earn it. I absolutely respect that id didn't just copy and paste what they did in 2016, but Eternal, while really fun, is also the most frustrating of the trilogy.
For me, it was the exact opposite. The 2016 soft reboot did not click with me personally upon initial release. But when Eternal hit the scene with its larger focus on movement and platforming-based puzzle solving, I was sold. I also quite enjoyed the larger focus on ammo management, which led me to utilizing my whole arsenal instead of simply relying on just one or two weapons.
You see, Jer, this is exactly why I wanted to start this channel with you, because sometimes we're the same and sometimes we're the opposite. I personally love growing attached to 2 or 3 weapons during a Doom game. I think it also adds a little bit of replay value because when I do go back to these games, I'll remember the weapons that I was attached to last time and I'll make a conscious effort to try new weapons. During the Dark Ages, I was mostly using a fully upgraded super shotgun and rocket launcher, and I just honestly never got tired of it. When Doom: The Dark Ages was first announced, I could tell right away it was going to be a return to 2016's one-man army feeling. But again, id Software has chosen not to retread old ground. What we have here in this 2025 version of Doom is a slightly slower, heavier, and tankier Doomslayer. You have a shield now that you can block attacks with, you can Captain America toss towards your enemies to stun them. You can also do the opposite and use the shield to bring you closer to the enemy.
When using the shield, there's just this level of oomph to it that really reminds me of how fun it was to just throw the Leviathan axe around in the God of War reboots.
The shield also has a chainsaw function too because, why not? The Dark Ages feels a bit more up close and personal. Melee combat feels properly chunky and necessary because it refills your ammo. You can do 3-hit melee combos, which feels great because you can see the armor pieces just exploding off your giant enemies. id Software really wants you to get comfortable with being in the face of your foes and taking them down. Of course, this is still Doom though. You're still going to be flying through enemies at intense speeds and taking down countless demons in a matter of seconds. Sometimes you won't even be able to process what's happening. Whenever I play one of these modern Doom games, I get an almost high-like feeling. I'm in a flow state. My surroundings start to blur and all I can focus on is the carnage I'm unloading in this game. Very few games are able to grab all of my attention like that.
There really is something special about utilizing every tool in your belt to link together kills in an almost combo-like fashion. Throwing your shield to stun a large enemy, killing a few smaller ones to replenish health, counter an attacking foe, and then returning to the stunned enemy to damage them and finish them off. It's an incredibly rewarding system in an almost fighting game-like or even Tony Hawk kind of way.
One thing I loved about Eternal was how colorful it was. Nothing felt better than chainsawing an enemy and seeing a rainbow barrage of ammo exploding out of them, or using a flamethrower to pick up those neon green armor packs.
It was a little controversial at the time, but I'm always a fan of this more stylized type of approach to visuals.
That colorfulness is a little bit lessened here to fit the dark fantasy setting, but we still have some of that arcadey neon brightness. Enemies have 2 types of shields, energy and metallic. I loved heating up a demon's metallic shield and using my shield to blow them up in a chain reaction, seeing all those blue health packs pop onto the ground. And on the flip side, blowing up blue energy shields with my blue plasma weapons, again, it was just this colorful, beautiful barrage. I do miss some of the mobility options of Eternal, like the air dash and the double jump, but it's okay because I understand, again, this is supposed to be a very up close and personal experience.
The stand your ground mentality is made even more clear by the shield's ability to both soak up a lot of damage while also utilizing a very satisfying parrying system that I really just could not get enough of.
But I do want to make it clear that if you love Eternal and you're going to the Dark Ages disappointed that it's slower, you can actually go into the accessibility options and up the game speed, up enemy projectile speed. You can really customize the difficulty here in a certain specific way. Immediately after like 10 minutes, I upped the game speed by 3 notches and I was just having a much better time. I want to praise id for these accessibility options. I know a lot of times when people hear accessibility, they think that, oh, it's just supposed to make the game stupid easy. But no, in this case, you can really customize the FPS experience you want. This combat system arguably might be my favorite in the trilogy. Eternal is very fresh in my memory because I just beat it 6 months ago. But it's been years since I played Doom 2016, so I'd like to go back and compare how I feel about the combat system in that game.
Funnily enough, I actually just went back to 2016 days before the Dark Ages released, as when I originally played it, I checked out pretty quickly from it due to playing it on PS4 with a controller, even though I'm far more comfortable on mouse and keyboard. Returning to 2016, on PC this time of course, was a breath of fresh air for me and expertly gave me that godlike sense of power and control the series executes so flawlessly. It's a perfect gameplay system on its own, but it also creates a pretty solid foundation for id to expand and experiment with in the future.
Here's how you know id has mastered the art of sequels. Every time I play a new Doom game and I'm experimenting with the new mechanics, I have a moment where I think back on the previous game and I think to myself, how the hell did I ever play the previous game without these new mechanics? That's the way I feel about the shield here. I don't know how I played through 2016 and Eternal without this awesome shield. Not every mechanic is perfect though. This time around, the Doomslayer can pilot a giant mech and even a dragon. I have to commend id for bringing back that shallow, PS2 boring minigame design for these sections. Okay, all sarcasm aside, these sections aren't genuinely bad. They're just very hollow feeling and brief. There's nothing about the flying dragon or its combat arenas that feels special.
That said though, the dragon sections do have this really nice bit of pacing to them, as in between the very video gamey dodging and shooting of the dragon, there's small enemy bases that you're asked to land at and clear out on foot. This allows the dragon segments to serve as a bit of a breather between Doom's more chaotic boots on the ground combat, while still giving you enough of that to be satisfying.
The flying combat, I'm using air quotes there, is so shallow that it basically could have just been a quick time event.
That much, however, cannot be said about the game's other new mechanic.
The mech just feels like first-person rock'em sock'em robots. Oh yeah, and the mech can sometimes get a gun too, which basically makes it the exact same gameplay as the core Doom gameplay, except slower and with far fewer options.
Yeah, if I wanted to play a slower version of Doom, I'd go play a game series that actually does it well, like Bungie's original run of Halo.
I don't think these sections are game ruining, but I wish id Software was better at recognizing where they shine and where they don't shine. They make the best first-person shooting combat in the industry right now. So why did they feel the need to spend precious time and money on a shitty Panzer Dragoon and mech minigame? The Dark Ages also sadly continues the trend started by Eternal with an even heavier focus on narrative. I didn't find Eternal's cutscenes to be too obtrusive, but the Dark Ages, from what I saw, has longer, more frequent cutscenes.
Thankfully, these never really interrupt gameplay, instead mostly serving as small bookends to each chapter.
And there's a few more central characters that don't feel properly introduced. It feels like you're starting a TV show in the middle rather than the beginning.
This is especially true considering how deep Doom lore goes if you're willing to dig at and read each game's codex entries. But none of this has ever been necessary to the game, and trying to ham-fist it in this late in the series feels counterproductive. It reminded me a lot of the Hitman series, where Absolution tried way too hard to create a central and more involved narrative, when all we really needed was a simple reason for why the gameplay matters. Not to say either series' story and lore are bad, in fact I find both of them quite fascinating, but that's not what most people are here for.
And the reason why I said from what I saw is because I started skipping the cutscenes after like an hour. I know, blasphemy.
Blasphemy.
No disrespect to the writers at id, but this is Doom. The gameplay is the story I'm going to be telling to my friends, not the story of some stupid demonic war. Maybe that's narrow-minded of me. Maybe it's unfair to act like Doom can't tell a good story. But I don't know, I'm not here for a gripping narrative.
If Dill's take on the narrative wasn't controversial enough, I might ruffle some more feathers with my take on the soundtrack. Obviously, we need to address the elephant in the room here. After a pretty public falling out between id and composer Mick Gordon, there's some pretty massive shoes needing filled in the music department. First and foremost, I do not envy anyone who has to follow in Gordon's footsteps here, as the soundtrack of electronic metal fusion he created has become entirely synonymous with the Doom reboot's identity. It seems, though, that Finishing Move Incorporated was up to the task. Going all the way back to the original Doom in 1993, the soundtracks to each entry have taken huge inspiration from their era's modern metal scene. The most famous track from the first game, At Doom's Gate, E1M1, was clearly inspired by the quick and punishing thrash riffs of Metallica's Master of Puppets. Evolving with each entry, Mick Gordon reinvented the sound in 2016 with his mashup of dark and foreboding synths with drop-tune djenty guitar riffs. This combination nicely complemented the game's theming of Hell's Army melding flesh with technology. Finishing Move then takes a more stripped-back approach here for the Dark Ages, which I feel really matches the more medieval theming of the game. That's not to say that electronic elements are gone entirely though, just that they are much less present here with guitar, bass, and drums taking center stage, seemingly inspired in some way by the original game's soundtrack. I actually think there was a bit of a missed opportunity here to experiment a bit further by trying to incorporate chants, choirs, and symphonic instruments into the music. What we get here, though, is a very straightforward pummeling of modern metalcore and deathcore, with a hefty helping of syncopated rhythms, double bass drumming, palm-muted chugs, breakdowns, and even an occasional blast beat thrown in. While it's not quite as groovy or punchy as Mick Gordon's work, Finishing Move have made a soundtrack that expertly matches the Dark Ages gameplay and themes, while still giving metalheads something to throw their horns up to.
Overall, any negatives I have to say about this game are seriously just nitpicks. This game is a masterclass in single-player FPS action that we rarely see in the AAA space. Usually shooters with this type of speed and action are limited to the indie game space, which is cool. I love my indie boomer shooters, but it's nice to play one of these with the level of flash and glamour that only a AAA budget can achieve. I seriously need to marinate on my thoughts with all three of these modern Doom games because it's hard for me to rank this trilogy. But I want you to make no mistake though, even if Doom the Dark Ages is at the bottom of my trilogy ranking, that is still an impressive feat. Again, this is one of the best trilogies in modern gaming.
Just like they did all the way back in 1993, id have once again shown what all others in the genre should strive for. No one entry in this reboot feels like a miss, and The Dark Ages is yet another massive success from id's talented team of developers.